We're going to be going to China today. Yes, China, at least through podcast. That's going to be the aim of the podcast on today's episode, to discuss some things going on, some rather frightening things going on in the Far East. We often forget what's going on in the Far East, but with all the wild and insane things that are happening over to us in the West here, we got the migrant crisis, we have all this corruption, the Russian probe going on here in America, the vast divide between the red and the blue, we have school shootings, we have all kinds of things going on here. Hey, we do have a rising economy though. But with all this wildness going on in the West, we often forget the things that are going on in the East. And there's some things happening in China that should give us all pause to think. China, after all, is a communist regime, and it is, I think, very revealing and poignant that things that are happening over there would be happening under a communistic government. But before we go over there, there's something on Twitter that I noticed that I found rather humorous. Let me just see here. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. And this has to do with, let's see, the migrant issue. You'll know, I guess it was former RNC chairman Michael Steele made a reference in regards to the Trump administration. There's a controversy going on right now that the Trump administration is being accused of separating immigrant families and separating the children from the parents. And Trump, of course, is defending himself and saying that the bill that does this was actually put in place by the Democrats. I haven't really looked into that part of it, but what I do find humorous is remarks made by Michael Steele, our RNC chairman Michael Steele, apparently former RNC chairman, saying that these children were being taken to concentration camps, literally. Now, I mean, even he knows that's not true. Anyone involved knows that's not true. But he's trying to put a certain image in the American people's mind of the horrors awaiting these children as they're taken from their parents. It's an attempt by him and others in the Democratic Party to paint the administration, and Trump in particular, as heartless, mean-spirited, Nazi-like individuals whose mentality has no sympathy to it, no concern for humankind, and just no empathy for the plights of these immigrants coming illegally into our country. And so, to further enforce this stereotype that they wish to paint the administration with, Michael Steele has now made these comments saying that the children are being taken to concentration camps. What I found funny about that, beyond the fact that it's just simply not true, was pictures. Now, what I saw this on Twitter, okay, and it was in my Twitter feed, and it had Laura Ingraham was, of course, blasting Michael Steele for making these comments about kids being taken to concentration camps. Directly below it was somebody else's article, a Fox News article on San Francisco being a sanctuary city. And so the article has numerous pictures and documentation of the horrors of San Francisco, the poor living conditions of many of the immigrants in San Francisco, living on the streets, living under very poorly constructed tents, living under tarps, literally living in crates on the streets with no food and barely any shelter. Because being a sanctuary city, all the immigrants are flooding in. And so I did find it kind of humorous that Michael Steele, in one sentence, one breath, is going to say that Trump is separating families and taking kids to concentration camps, when he would like to see all the immigrants stay together and go to what literally amounts to if not a concentration camp, a decrepit, disease-filled ghetto in places like San Francisco. So on the one hand, the kids are going to concentration camps. On the other hand, he would like to keep the families together in other concentration camp type areas. I find it rather humorous. Obviously, this is just propaganda on the Democrats' part to just make Trump and the Republican Party look guilty for basically just trying to enforce the law. These people are coming across the border illegally. Nancy Pelosi, I call her plastic face. She was making more stupid, inane, and ridiculous comments about how never in our recent history, or no other president that she can think of, was so opposed to new people coming into the country. But I mean, again, she and everyone else in the Democratic Party and who is opposed to Trump's view on immigration is blatantly ignoring the fact that nobody on the Republican Party or Trump or me or anybody else on the right is saying that we're opposed to immigration. We are opposed to illegal immigration. It is that key word that everybody should be opposed to. When Trump called immigrants, or made comments, what they thought were comments towards immigrants, being animals, it was actually in reference to MS-13. So there is this continuous twisting of words and ideologies and of platforms, all to make it seem, I mean, this ridiculous spin. And it's not only all to make it seem like we just don't like Mexicans, we just don't like foreigners, we just don't like anybody. And that's clearly not true. If you really look at the comments that Trump has made, or others in his administration, anybody, myself included, any of these other people, just on the right, people like Milo Yiannopoulos or Ben Shapiro, much as he's been annoying me lately, the execrable Mike Cernovich, all these type people who are on the right and in public view, none of them are really saying that they don't want immigrants here. It is illegal, unrestrained illegal immigration that they are opposed to. And we have very good reason to be afraid of it. If you look over to the West, over in places like England or Sweden or Italy or Spain or just Hungary, Austria, any place in Europe that has taken, Germany, number one, with the lovely Angela Merkel bringing her country to the verge of collapse right now. The German government is in a state of total crisis at the moment over this issue of unrestrained migration. We have good reason to be afraid of these things. Look at the terrorist attacks. Look at the rise in violence. Look at London, where they've banned guns, and yet there is more crime per capita in London than there is in New York City, where we have guns. So we have good reason to be afraid of these. And all these things did not just come out of nowhere. They are linked, undeniably, with the migration, with these millions of people coming in who have no real knowledge or ties to our values and our culture, and who are just being jammed into these countries with no real forethought, no real plan as to how they would assimilate. And many of them, or some of them at least, coming in have absolutely no desire to assimilate. If you listen to the equally execrable and horrible, decrepit, and mind-bogglingly stupid Linda Sarsour, she gave that famous speech where she called the Trump administration white supremacists in the White House, and how she will not view them as her president, and how her and her followers have absolutely no desire to assimilate, and it is not their duty to assimilate. So if you really think about that, what they're saying is, we're coming over here, we're going to make no effort to change or get involved or or become a part of American culture, but rather we're going to try to change American culture into what we are. And that's what they're doing in Europe. They're setting up Sharia courts. They're trying to institute blasphemy laws. And a lot of Muslims are rising up now into positions of power in the UK and other places, and it's having a horrendous effect on the people in the countries themselves. And it will continue to get worse the longer it goes on. And if there's another wave of migrants coming in, you will see dramatically how bad this can get. So, with all this going on, just swimmingly over here in the West, it is easy to forget what is going on with our compatriots and friends over in the East. So we go to China, and there is some, up until recently, I worked in the cable industry, and I was installing cable for actually an Indian family from India, not Native American, but from India. And he actually told me something I had never heard before, that China had recently instituted what they would call, I guess, what is being called a social credit system. So in other words, and I guess it's, from what I'm reading here, there's an article here that I'm reading from the Telegraph, the UK Telegraph. Excuse me. I'll just read it. It's by Jamie Fullerton, and it was published on the 24th of March, 2018 at 6:58 p.m. The article says, "It sounds like the plot line from an episode of Black Mirror set in a dystopian future, but China's social credit system has already seen over 12 million people slapped with domestic travel bans as punishment for bad behavior. 9 million Chinese have been banned from buying domestic flights, and 3 million more from buying business class tickets in early trials of the scheme, under which citizens are rated on their compliance with social norms and rules." And we'll just stop it right there. This is the frightening part. You remember that China is a communist government, which means the government holds all the cards, makes all the rules, and the people have to follow suit. They do not have freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom of worship, freedom of gathering, freedom of protest. They do not have any of the common freedoms that we have in the United States or in the West in general. They do not have freedom of thought either. And so now the government has instituted a camera system, a social credit system that watches the daily lives of its citizens and rates them on their behavior. And based on their rating of that behavior, they are either basically given privileges or denied certain privileges or rights. The right to travel, to buy things, to just engage in daily activities can be banned by this social credit system. The really scary thing is that they're being a little vague on who actually is instituting the rules behind the social credit system. I'll keep reading, but it gets scary. It gets very scary. I've read a couple articles on this now, and I think it's a perfect example of how frightening things can get. And as we move into the future, the more and more frightening they are going to get when you marry totalitarian governments with the advancing technology. And there's no doubt at all that the more our technology advances, the more it gives governments the power to control people. We really are getting to a point now with technology where people and governments, people in those governments who are power hungry and wish to control, will now have the real opportunity to do it. There's no denying that. With camera systems, with the monetary system, they probably are, and I've read numerous things about it from different people, financial magazines and people in the know, more or less, that there is a war on cash. And that's, I mean, if you just think about it, of course they would want to get rid of cash in the long term. You can't control cash, really. Once it's out there, people can use it at their disposal to trade and to buy. But if you have no cash and everything's based on a credit system, on digital currency, that can be controlled 100% by a government or a technological corporation and the banks. It can be controlled 100% through them. And so your monetary system with new technology can be controlled 100% by governments and global powers. That's scary stuff. It means we're moving, if certain people and certain governments get into the right places with the right kind of power, you won't be able to buy anything. You won't be able to sell anything. You won't be able to purchase food, clothing, shelter, anything, cars. You won't be able to travel. Any of these things you will not be able to do if you happen to fall foul or say or do something that the government doesn't like. That's the potential with this technology were it to fall into the wrong hands. And it seems to have done that in China. It seems to have. And it's a frightening thing. It really is. The idea that they would be watching at every moment what you're doing and judging you based on what you do. And based on that judgment, you could not travel or even get privileges. But would you want privileges just based on something that an all-knowing, all-seeing government would give you? The article goes on, behavior that triggered the bans varied from obstructing footpaths with electric bikes to failing to pay fines. I mean, how silly and stupid do you get that that behavior that triggered the bans varied from obstructing footpaths. Obstructing a footpath has gotten somebody banned from traveling in China. I mean, that's the definition of the abuse of this kind of power. It goes on. Zhang Yong, whose name I probably just butchered, deputy director of the China's National Development and Reform Commission, the NDRC, said the trials were taking place across China's provinces over the next 2 years. So it's kind of in its trial form right now. This article was written in 2018 in March. So by 2020, actually another article that I'll be looking at in just a second here and reading some parts to you, did say that by 2020 they were hoping to have this instituted. I'm assuming nationwide, possibly. Let's see. From that, the social credit system is based on the government's phrase, once untrustworthy, always restricted. And that's just freaking crazy. Once untrustworthy, always restricted. I mean, this is crazy. What about religious minorities in China? If you were to believe something, I mean, China is an atheistic country. What about Christians living in China? What about any religion? But I'm a Christian, so my fear would be for other Christians. As a side note, there's a great website called Open Doors USA, which really shines a light on persecution of Christians in countries like China and around the world. So if you want to know what's going on with your brothers and sisters in Christ around the world, check out Open Doors USA. But this is something that could really have a dire effect on those who claim the name of Christ over in China. I would assume that behavior like, if you can get banned from flying, excuse me, if you can get banned from flying for blocking a footpath, I would assume that going to church or teaching your child that there is a God would have far more dire consequences. Okay. Once untrustworthy, always restricted, and is set to be tested further on the country's train system from May 1st. It was announced last week. From that date, violating a new set of transport-related offenses listed by the NDRC and China Supreme Court could result in travel bans. Let's see. Smoking cigarettes in no-smoking areas of trains. Riding a train without a correct ticket and selling counterfeit tickets were among the offenses listed that could result in 180-day bans from buying train tickets. Mr. Zhang said the NDRC will increase the intensity of joint rewards and punishments so that dishonest people will be punished and the faithful will be motivated. Those punished under the system will also be shamed online, that's crazy too. They're going to actually shame people online by having their names listed on a train ticket booking website for 1 week. So not only will you be banned, but you will also it will be put out there publicly that you are banned from traveling. And it doesn't say, but will they also put what you did wrong on there too? Is that part of the shaming? I mean, this is just madness. This is crazy 1984 style Orwellian madness is what it is. It is control. It is an attempt to control an entire population, and it's insane. If this were to spread outside of China and start coming our way, especially with all the stuff that is going on right now with the European Union and this drive by people like Soros and others at globalization, this is the kind of technology that would fit perfectly hand in glove with what they are trying to put together out west. And this is the kind of stuff that has to be stopped. It is contraindicated. Is that even the right word? I can't think right now because I'm tired. But it is contrary in every way to freedom. This stupid social credit system. It is crap from beginning to end. And it's a slap in the face to anyone in a free society. Human rights groups are concerned that as the system is fully implemented around 2020, it may widen its use of apps and citizens' social media behavior to rate them, including using information about political allegiances, which is what I was just saying about religious allegiances, but they can also do it politically as well, obviously. The Chinese government is watching the progress of Sesame Credit, a private credit system run by Ant Financial, a firm affiliated with Chinese retail giant Alibaba. The system judges users on behavior such as how long they play video games. Okay. How long they play video games for, and what products they buy online, giving them a score that many users share on Chinese social media. A spokesperson for Sesame Credit told The Telegraph that it does not share private user information with the government unless compelled to do so for legal reasons. Anyone who believes that the government won't be involved or won't be reading into this stuff is absolutely stupid. You are naive to think that they won't be using this, and if they are behind it. They absolutely are. They are the driving force behind it. I guarantee you that the government owns the corporation that is instituting this social credit system. Please, they are behind it all. This is their idea. This is gold to them. Okay. John Lagerqvist, Chinese internet specialist at the Swedish Institute of International Affairs, told Wired, it is very ambitious in both depth and scope, including scrutinizing individual behavior and what books people are reading. So they're even going to be looking at what books you read on your Nook or your Kindle or from the bookstore or what you purchase off Amazon. It's Amazon's consumer tracking with an Orwellian political twist. The fact that they would say that it's Amazon's consumer tracking with an Orwellian political twist, the fact that they would say that as a kind of endorsement just shows you how crazy people have become. The fact that they can say something has an Orwellian political twist and not be using it in a negative way just shows you how completely disjointed and cut off from reality a lot of people are now. Describing anything that way is a negative right from the get-go, right out the gates, right from the bat. And they're using it as a kind of positive endorsement, and that's just absolutely silly and inane and stupid. There's another article on it from CBS News. This is a newer, April 28th, so this is a little bit newer. 24th, 2018. By 2020, China plans to give all its 1.4 billion citizens a personal score based on how they behave. Some with low scores are already being punished if they want to travel. Nearly 11 million Chinese are not allowed to fly because of scores with the system, and 4 million are barred from trains. Next week, the program will start expanding nationwide. And that is just freaking scary that the biggest country in the world is now going to have something like this. Anyone who thought that China was slowly moving towards a kind of Western freedom for its people ought to just check this out, and they'll have their hopes dashed immediately. I know that I've read articles and heard people saying that things aren't as bad as they used to be in China as far as the communist regime and government that had been in place before, whereas before the Chinese people were not able to speak out politically in any way or give dissent or talk freely in the streets, and it seems like that's slacked a little bit. Well, they are slacking no more. With this new system, things are going to bounce right back to the old days. Any hopes for freedom that they had will instantly be dashed, along with their ability to travel, to gather religiously and politically, or even socially, depending on their score. The government says it is trying to, quote-unquote, purify society, which is another result of atheism. In a Christian country, you would not need the government or even want the government to, quote-unquote, purify anything. A Christian country that has Christian values, Judeo-Christian values, as its foundation, does not need the government watching everything you do. People would by and large be living off of a very moral system voluntarily, and not be forced or coerced to do so. It is just a common sense moral way to live, these Judeo-Christian values. Do not steal, do not lie, do not bear false witness against your neighbor, do not commit adultery, do not steal, and of course the greatest commandment, which is love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. What could possibly be wrong with that? Absolutely nothing. It is the foundation for any successful society. If that were not so, why are there millions of migrants flocking from Islamic countries to Christian nations? If it were not so, why are so many millions flocking to Christian, Judeo-Christian countries? Anyway, by rewarding people who are trustworthy and punishing those who are not, reports CBS News correspondent Ben Tracy. So like the credit scores most Americans have based on how they handle their finances, Chinese citizens are getting a social credit score based on everything from whether they pay their taxes on time to how they cross the street to what they post online. Even to how they cross the freaking street. You can't even jaywalk anymore without being banned from getting on a damn train. Are you kidding me? Jaywalking is one of my favorite things to do. Anytime I leave the house, I intentionally look for my first opportunity to jaywalk. And they've just taken it away, just like that. This is what happens when you don't have freedom. I base all my freedom over whether I can jaywalk or not. Anyway. When Lin Hu recently tried to book a flight, he was told he was banned from flying because he was on the list of untrustworthy people, which is a very bad term. Now, if you just jaywalked and now you've been put on a list as an untrustworthy person, I mean, come on, is the shaming meeting the crime? I don't think so. Liu is a journalist who was ordered by a court to apologize for a series of... here we go. Here we get to the truth. Liu is a journalist who was ordered by a court to apologize for a series of tweets he wrote and was then told his apology was insincere. Now think about that. So this guy put out some tweets. He was told by the government that these tweets are inappropriate. I assume his score was affected immediately. He probably wanted to travel and was like, well, okay, so I'll apologize. And he thinks everything's okay, and he goes back to either the airport or the train station, and he's told there that no, you still cannot travel. Well, what's the deal with that? Well, I apologize, and they told me that's what I needed to do, so what the heck, what gives, He goes back home, and he finds out that, lo and behold, your apology was not accepted because we think it's insincere. I mean, think about this. Anybody with any common sense or any rationality to them should just vomit and puke in a bucket right now at the thought of this being instituted in the largest country in the world, where even when you apologize, the government holds the right to determine whether it's a sincere apology or not. Now, I mean, in some ways that may be good if it were here, because then that means Samantha Bee and Kathy Griffin would never leave their homes. They wouldn't be allowed to travel anywhere. They wouldn't be allowed to broadcast, and we'd all be better for that, obviously. But besides those two people, oh, and who is it, Joy Reid? Yeah, she'd be gone too. She's a glaring walking hypocrisy for the left, and yeah, she needs to have an ankle bracelet and be just basically chained to the radiator in her basement for the rest of her life. Anyway, let's see. Lou goes on to say, I can't buy property. My child can't go to a private school. You feel you're being controlled by the list all the time. And this is only because the government decided his apology was insincere. This is scary, scary stuff. The list is now getting longer as every Chinese citizen is being assigned a social credit score, a fluctuating rating based on a range of behaviors. It's believed that community service and buying Chinese-made products can raise your score. Fraud, tax evasion, and smoking in non-smoking areas, another favorite pastime of mine, can drop it. If a score gets too low, a person can be banned from buying plane and train tickets, real estate, cars, and even high-speed internet. So even your ability to communicate on a basic level in today's world will be affected by this. It's a good thing, one Chinese woman said. There should be punishment for people who can't behave. China's growing network of surveillance cameras makes all of this possible. Oh, man. The country already has an estimated 176 million cameras. It plans to have more than 600 million installed by 2020. So over the next 2 years, they're going to install over 400 million more frigging cameras in China. Wow, that is not good. That is not good. It can recognize more than 4,000 vehicles, SenseTime CEO Zhu Li said. SenseTime is one of China's most successful artificial intelligence companies. It has created smart cameras for the government that can help catch criminals, but also track average citizens. This knows every person, every bike, every car, every bus, Tracy asked him, watching a monitor. We can tell whether it is an adult, a child, male, or female, Zhu said. In several big cities in China, including here in Shanghai, the government is even tracking jaywalkers, so I'd be screwed. Cameras record them going through intersections, zero in on their face, and then publicly shame them on nearby video screens. So immediately you're up there on the video screen, shamed as a jaywalker. It's just great. That's all. I might just travel to China just so I can jaywalk. I might just do that. Why not? Ken D. Waskin, who has studied China's economic and political culture for more than 3 decades, said the way the new scoring system truly works is kept secret and could be easily abused by the government. And that goes back to what I just said. Of course the government's involved. That's a no-brainer. Anyone who doesn't believe they're involved is naive and stupid. How far into people's daily mundane activities does this go? Tracy asked. Well, I think that the government and the people running the plan would like it to go as deeply as possible, to determine how to allocate benefits and also how to impact and shape their behavior, Dwoskin said. There are upsides if the Chinese government considers you trustworthy. Well, I would assume that them considering you trustworthy would not just be you obeying everyday laws like not jaywalking, smoking in designated areas, paying your taxes on time. It probably has to more do with how far you go with not voicing your own opinions, not going to religious functions that are prohibited by the government, not holding any opinions that the government doesn't like, things like that. In other words, the more of a robot you are, the more they consider you trustworthy, is what I would think. Those people, the article goes on, those people can get discounts on energy bills, better interest rates at banks, and China's largest online dating site reportedly even boosts the profile of people with good social credit scores. So you'll have an easier time getting laid, too. Well, that's awesome. Yep. This is the East, and that's China for you. So remember, as bad and as crazy as things are in the West, we still have our freedoms, and we don't have cameras monitoring us 100% of the time from all angles. Not too long ago, I heard an article about two cities here in America, both of which I'm familiar with. One I spent a good deal of time in. It was Wilmington, Delaware. That was actually the first. Wilmington, Delaware was the first city in America, I think, to have its entire downtown area under camera surveillance. And that, even though Wilmington has a small population, they have a tremendous problem with crime. Besides Wilmington, there is also Lancaster. So there are cities here that have a lot of surveillance. And people are complaining all the time about these camera systems in Wilmington and Lancaster, that they're an invasion of our privacy. They should keep their concerns a little bit muted, only because you don't have to look, well, you have to look far, but just look to the east and see what could possibly be coming if we do not keep ourselves in check, and if we are not vigilant in protecting our freedoms. This is what could happen. These kind of technologies that are available in China and are being instituted go hand in glove with the kind of mentality, the globalist mentality, that is trying to be shoved down our throats, this crappy PC culture that would love nothing more than to have our behaviors monitored at every opportunity by a government that is gone run amok with thirst for power and control. If we are not vigilant, this could be us in no time at all. And people like George Soros, who should have been dead 20 years ago, would love nothing more than to get us there. All right. You'll have noticed that I've kind of put off, possibly you noticed, the podcast on abortion. It's going to be a very heavy and graphic episode. I'm going to go straight into it, balls to the wall. So I've been kind of working on it little by little here and there, and in the meantime doing the episodes like this. So it is coming, and when it does, it's going to be like a haymaker to Planned Parenthood. I'm going to send it right to them, honestly. I'll deliver to their doorstep if I have to. But that's the end of this episode. Good luck. God be with you.